In the late summer of 1914, Paris stood precariously on the edge of disaster, a city teetering between hope and despair. The German army, seemingly unstoppable and relentless, was closing in with a menacing determination, its sights firmly set on the French capital, threatening to change the course of history. The French government, in a desperate bid to preserve its leadership, had already fled to Bordeaux, leaving Parisians anxious, uncertain, and feeling abandoned in their hour of need. Rumors and fear filled the air as distant artillery echoed ominously across the city, each explosion a reminder of the approaching threat. Would Paris fall? This haunting question lingered in every street and cafe, a specter that refused to be ignored. Some citizens, gripped by fear, fled south, seeking safety, while others stayed behind, resolute and determined, digging trenches and building barricades, ready to defend their beloved home at all costs. The fate of France, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance, as soldiers and civilians stood side by side, united in their resolve. If Paris fell, France would likely surrender, leaving Britain isolated and Germany dominant in Europe, a scenario that could alter the global power structure. The world watched with bated breath as the German army drew ever closer, the outcome uncertain, the stakes higher than ever before. The French army, aware of the gravity of the situation, prepared for a final, desperate stand east of the city, ready to fight with every ounce of strength they had. This would become the first battle of the Marne, a monumental clash of wills, strategy, and courage, where the fate of nations would be decided. Old-world tactics would meet the brutal realities of modern warfare, a collision of past and present on the battlefield. In a moment of crisis, even the city's humble taxis would be called to action, ferrying soldiers to the front lines in a remarkable display of civilian bravery. This is the story of how, in one fateful week, the world was pulled back from the brink, a testament to the resilience and courage of those who refused to surrender. To truly grasp the scale of the crisis that erupted in 1914, you must first understand the Schlieffen Plan, Germany's ambitious blueprint for a swift and decisive victory in the West. Crafted to avoid the nightmare of a two-front war, the plan called for a rapid, overwhelming strike through neutral Belgium, aiming to encircle Paris and crush France within just 6 weeks, before Russia could fully mobilize in the east. The plan depended on speed, flawless coordination, and the hope that every piece would fall perfectly into place. German generals believed that with precise timing, they could outmaneuver their enemies and force a quick surrender. For nearly a month, the plan seemed unstoppable. German armies stormed through Belgium, overwhelming towns and fortresses, pushing the French and British forces back in a relentless, almost mechanical retreat. Yet, Belgian resistance, especially at the fortress city of Liège, proved unexpectedly fierce. The defenders held out longer than anyone predicted, slowing the German advance and costing them precious days. Meanwhile, Britain entered the war, dispatching its small but highly trained expeditionary force across the Channel to support the embattled French. Despite determined resistance, the Allies were steadily forced back. By late August, German troops were advancing rapidly, their sights set on Paris itself. The French army's own Plan 17, a bold but flawed strategy, had failed disastrously, leaving the nation vulnerable and scrambling to regroup. Morale in France plummeted. Parisians anxiously read the latest war news, and the once bustling streets grew tense and deserted as the German army drew ever closer. Paris was just days from occupation. German soldiers, though exhausted from weeks of marching and fighting, remained confident. Many believed that victory was within their grasp, and the war would soon be over. The stage was set for what many thought would be the final, decisive blow, a battle that would determine the fate of nations. The fate of Europe now hung in the balance, to be decided in the fields and river valleys just outside Paris, along the banks of the Marne. It seemed as if nothing could halt the relentless German advance, as columns of infantry and artillery pressed forward across the open countryside. But war, as history has shown time and again, is full of surprises, and the next days would change everything. At the heart of the unfolding drama stood three generals, each carrying the weight of their nation's hopes and fears as the world teetered on the edge of catastrophe. General Joseph Joffre, the French commander-in-chief, was calm and methodical, quietly preparing a last stand as his armies retreated. His stoic presence inspired confidence among his men, even as the enemy pressed ever closer to Paris. Helmuth von Moltke the Younger, the German chief of staff, was distant and indecisive, struggling to control his advancing armies from afar. The pressure of command weighed heavily on him, and uncertainty clouded his judgment as the front lines shifted. General Alexander von Kluck, leading the German First Army, was aggressive and relentless, determined to crush the French before Paris. His boldness drove his troops forward, but it also blinded him to the dangers lurking on his flanks. Joffre reorganized his battered forces, sacking failing commanders and planning a counterattack. He worked tirelessly, rallying his officers and restoring discipline, determined to turn retreat into resistance. Moltke, plagued by poor communication, grew anxious as the situation changed rapidly. Messages from the front were delayed or unclear, leaving him isolated and increasingly desperate for reliable information. Kluck, obsessed with destroying the French Fifth Army, made a fateful decision that would alter the course of the war. His single-minded pursuit led him to expose his army's flank, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. These three men, Joffre the Rock, Moltke the Warrior, Kluck the Hunter, would shape the coming battle. Their personalities and leadership styles would soon collide in a test of wills and strategy. Their strengths and flaws would be tested in the largest clash the world had ever seen. The fate of nations would hang in the balance as their armies marched toward destiny. The outcome would depend on their choices in the days ahead, as every decision could tip the scales between victory and disaster. The Battle of the Marne would be their crucible, a moment that would define not only their careers, but the future of Europe itself. The fate of millions rested on their shoulders, as families and entire nations watched and waited, hoping for deliverance in the storm of war. The turning point came on August 31st. General von Kluck, chasing the retreating French, turned his army east of Paris instead of sweeping around it as planned. He hoped to trap the French Fifth Army, but in doing so, he exposed his right flank. Moltke, far from the front, approved the move without grasping its danger. The gap between Kluck's First Army and Bülow's Second Army widened, an opening the Allies quickly noticed. Allied reconnaissance flights spotted Kluck's columns marching southeast, not west. General Gallieni, Paris's military governor, saw the opportunity. "They offer us their flank." Joffre seized the moment, ordering a halt to the retreat and a full-scale counterattack. On September 5th, the French Sixth Army struck Kluck's exposed flank from Paris. Kluck was forced to swing his army west to meet the threat, widening the gap even further. The trap was set. The Allies prepared to drive into the breach. The fate of Paris would be decided in the coming days. On September 6th, the Allied counterattack began. Across a 100-mile front, French and British troops turned to fight, exhausted but determined. The focus was the 30-mile gap between Kluck and Bülow's armies. Joffre ordered the French Fifth Army and the British Expeditionary Force to advance into the breach. The BEF, hesitant at first, pushed forward, threatening to split the German front. German commanders, caught off guard, struggled to respond as chaos spread. General von Bülow, fearing encirclement, ordered a retreat, widening the gap further. Moltke, overwhelmed, sent Lieutenant Colonel Hensch to the front with authority to order a withdrawal. On September 9th, Hensch authorized a general retreat. German soldiers, stunned, fell back from the Marne. The miracle of the Marne was complete. The German advance was broken. Paris was saved. The war had changed course. Amid the chaos, one story became legend: the Paris taxis. On September 7th, with the French Sixth Army in desperate need of reinforcements, General Gallieni ordered the city's taxis to the front. 600 taxis, painted red and green, ferried thousands of soldiers to the battle. The military impact was small, but the psychological effect was enormous. The sight of civilian taxis carrying troops became a symbol of national unity and defiance. The drivers, ordinary Parisians, became heroes overnight. The government even paid their fares, recorded on the meters, a detail that captured the world's imagination. The taxis of the Marne showed a city and a nation willing to do whatever it took to survive. Their story endures as a testament to French resourcefulness. In the darkest hour, Paris refused to surrender. The city's spirit would not be broken. The German retreat from the Marne was chaotic and bitter. The dream of a quick victory was shattered. The Schlieffen plan had failed. Moltke, devastated, was replaced as German commander. The Germans halted north of the River Aisne, digging in to hold their ground. The Allies, unable to break through, dug their own trenches. The war of movement ended. A new era of static, attritional warfare began. The Western Front was born, a scar stretching from Switzerland to the North Sea. Both sides tried to outflank each other in the race to the sea, but the lines only grew longer. The only way forward was through a hellish landscape of mud, wire, and machine guns. The stalemate would last 4 years, consuming a generation. The quick war everyone expected was gone. The Battle of the Marne had locked Europe into a deadly struggle. The world would never be the same. The First Battle of the Marne was a turning point in history. It saved France and Paris from defeat, ensuring the war would not end quickly. The battle shattered illusions of a short, glorious conflict. The failure of the Schlieffen plan ushered in years of trench warfare and unimaginable suffering. The Marne is not just a story of victory, but the beginning of the Western Front's horrors. It reminds us that history is shaped by chance, error, and human resolve. What if Kluck hadn't turned east? What if Allied reconnaissance had failed? The fate of the world hung on split-second decisions. The Marne is a testament to resilience and sacrifice. Ordinary soldiers, not knowing they were saving the world, stood their ground. In 1 week, Paris and the world was saved.